say thank you. Thank you so much for, okay, Laura, first of all, I totally invited myself to your meeting. So thank you for letting me come and accepting my self invitation.
But we're honored to have you. Thank you for that.
And I just want to thank all of you for your time today. So I'm trying to be respectful. I will try as much as possible to be respectful of it. And hopefully, I know a lot of you are on mute and everything, but I hope that after I'm done talking, we can maybe have more of a conversation about this too, because I would really like to hear your thoughts after I talk about these regulations. So with that, I will go ahead and, Laura, can you give me screen sharing privileges? Or while you're doing that, I'll just mention, my name is Kelly Schoonmaker. I am a program manager at StopWaste, which I think my bio is in the thing, but StopWaste is the Alameda County Waste Management Authority, and we are a joint powers authority, and we represent the cities of Alameda County, the county itself, and 2 sanitary districts. And our mission is basically to keep stuff out of landfill. And we've been doing that for decades, and mainly through education and outreach and grants and technical assistance on things from composting and recycling and reuse and upstream activities like food waste reduction. But we also do have a few regulations. I'm sure you're all familiar with the plant debris ban. You're welcome for that. So anyway, that's us. And so anyways, that's kind of what we work on. So today I am going to talk about, share my PowerPoint. Today, let's see, come on now. You guys should, is that good? Just the slide? Perfect. Today, I'm going to talk about SB 1383, which is a state regulation that's coming up, and give you a little background on it. It is mostly waste related, but it will affect you. So that's why I wanted to invite myself and let you know about it. Let's see. What else can I say about it? That's pretty much it. Okay, so let's just get started. All right, I just have my laptop today, and I'm sorry, I was going to turn my camera off because you probably see I have these 2 mongrels behind me, and I'm just going to stop my video so they don't do anything distracting. Okay, great. So SB 1383 is the bill name of the short-lived climate pollutant plan. And what this law does is it requires the state of California to divert organics, 75% of organics that are currently going to landfill from landfill by the year 2025. And part of that is also a food recovery, so a food rescue kind of component on commercial edible food generators to recover for human consumption 20% of edible food. And it's a state regulation, but like a lot of state regulations, the entities responsible for the implementation of this are cities and counties, and in some cases, some special districts. And the reason we're doing it is because when organics go to landfill and they decompose in an anaerobic situation, as we know, they create methane. And we dispose of so many organics in landfill that actually landfills are about 1/5 of the total methane emissions statewide. And we want to get rid of methane in general because it's much more powerful than carbon dioxide is as a climate forcer, right? So what's nice about it, it's short-lived. So if we take action on it, we might be able to see a benefit as opposed to carbon dioxide, which is like in the atmosphere for 800 years, right? These methane typically lives like 10 to 25 years. So hopefully, if we start acting now, we can see some benefit in the next couple decades. So SB 1383, the law was signed 5 years ago. It's 2021, 5 years ago by Governor Brown. And over the last few years, CalRecycle, which is the state agency responsible for it, has been working on the regulations, and they just released them not quite a year ago, but the regulations take effect on January 1, 2022, this coming January 1. So it's happening. And I'm just curious, maybe I can see you, if you are in a situation, not driving, where you can do thumbs up or something. How many of you had heard about this before I just told you what I told you about it? Anyone? Or maybe nobody can get to the thing. Okay, well, fascinating. Okay, great. That also just kind of helps me know what to say. Okay, great. So when we talk about organics, we talk about, I know that word gets used a lot, but we typically think of things like green waste, right? And wood and manure, but also food is another one that's pretty common. So these are all the things that need to be diverted from landfill. And 1383 is really comprehensive. So they also look at things like biosolids and digestate, as well as paper, textiles, and carpet, which don't get necessarily processed the same way as these other things, but are all organics and all create methane when they're decomposing anaerobically. And similarly, the regulations, it's a huge reg package. It's probably it's the biggest thing to happen since we started statewide recycling like in the late 80s. So it's a huge shift for the state. And it covers, I mentioned food recovery. So the edible food generators are all edible food generators over a certain size are gonna have to have agreements with food recovery organizations to accept their food, their surplus food that would otherwise be disposed of. And then there's also a big requirement. This is a huge thing, not so much for us in the Bay Area, we're used to this, but it's gonna be required statewide that every single family home, multifamily home, and commercial business has organics collection, curbside organics that accepts food waste. And then of course we expect with all these new generators coming online and a lot of education that there will probably be some contamination in that organic stream. So probably thinking of like food packaging, that kind of thing that can't be composted or digested. So knowing that CalRecycle put in some requirements to check for contamination everywhere on all the steps where the organics are getting dropped off from the curb all the way to the finished compost, which we know about their contamination requirements there. And again, this isn't such a huge deal in the Bay Area where we've had organics collection programs for a long time, but in many parts of the state where it's going to be new, they need new infrastructure to make, and whether it's going to be composting facilities or anaerobic digesters to process this additional material that's coming out of the landfill stream. And so with all this additional material, CalRecycle CalRecycle is anticipating that there will need to be markets for all these new products that are going to be made from all these organics. So whether it's renewable gas from anaerobic digestion or compost and mulch from going through a composting facility, that is, so they have instituted procurement requirements, which we will talk about, which I'm going to talk about today a little bit later. And kind of the focus of this talk, actually. So, although I know it said WELO, and don't worry, I will talk about WELO. I can't go anywhere without talking about WELO. So, and for each of these kind of aspects of the organic cycle, there's typically an education requirement on generators, a reporting requirement for the cities to report to the states, and enforcement requirements, not only for the cities on generators but also for the state on cities. So it's a lot. Okay, as promised, I'm going to start talking about WELO. So in addition to...
I sent it over to you yesterday. Let me go into my sent file.
Did somebody have a question? Oh, sorry, I don't have, all I can see is my slides. So. Okay, so in addition to all of these other requirements, the SB 1383 regulations require cities and jurisdictions to enforce some existing requirements in other parts of the code. So for example, CalGreen, they require that cities enforce the recycling, sufficient recycling space for occupants measure and some C&D measures, right? So cities are already doing that, but now they're required to also by 1383 with a threat of penalties, of financial penalties. And so for WELO, it's the same thing. They don't require any new requirements for WELO, just that cities enforce the existing requirements you see here about the soil report, compost, and the mulch requirements. So again, I can't, they're not new. However, you may see cities enforcing these requirements more than they had been in the past. So it might feel new. Anyway, in addition to the enforcement of it, then they have to demonstrate to CalRecycle that they are enforcing these measures of the WELO, and they have to do that by either adopting an ordinance, which many of them did, but not all of them did, or some other enforceable mechanism, which fortunately is a pretty broad term and includes things like permits, building permits. And then of course they have to report every year to CalRecycle on their WELO enforcement. And they are going to have, the reporting is pretty light. They only have to report the number of projects that they reviewed for WELO that year. So it's no additional reporting than they would have to do for DWR, but you might see that it will expand the jurisdictions that are actually enforcing just to meet this requirement. So we will see how it goes. And as I mentioned, there's financial penalties, and it's really an unknown right now. The range is really broad. A minor penalty is $500 a day and up to $10,000 a day for a major violation. And it's now oh, okay. Sorry, can you guys see the slides still?
Yes, Kelly, we can see them.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. I got some weird
Yes.
message from Zoom. Okay, sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt myself. Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and so we don't really know what the penalties are, but there will be penalties, and we will see how it goes. It's not clearly defined. All right. So there's a lot of, here's a little bit more detail. I'm going to make these slides available if you want. But most of this is going to be pertinent to the cities about what they're going to have to do. So if any of you are working with cities, it's kind of helpful for you to be aware of what they are going to be required to do, because much of this will get passed on to you. They'll need information from you for some of this, right? So in any case, I'll let you look at this on your own time. And get to kind of how this is going to affect you. Like I said, there's no change to the requirements, but I imagine that when the cities are enforcing those soil requirements, you may see more requirements attached to, more documentation required for doing, like submitting things like, or getting the certificate of completion done, probably delivery tags, that kind of thing, where maybe you weren't seeing that before, and it might just be in other cities. But I think as long as you've been complying with WELO on your work so far, it won't affect you very much. So that's good news, I guess. Okay. However, this might affect you more. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that 1383 does, I touched on, was the procurement requirements. So how it works, I'm going to talk about how it works and then what the materials are, and then dive in a little bit more into how it works, if that works for you guys. So this requirement is only for cities and counties, and they need to get a minimum amount of recovered organic waste products every year. So this is an annual requirement. And the target is based, and so that's stuff like compost and mulch and some other things I'm going to talk about. The target is not based on how much you need to use in your city, on your landscape. It's based on how much organics are currently being disposed statewide. And so there's a bit of a disconnect, and it makes for a really high target. The way they calculate it is they assume a 0.08 tons per person, and they multiply that by the population of the city to get your target. And I'll walk through that in a second. They're very careful. When I say they, I mean CalRecycle. They're very careful to say procure, because you do not need to buy it, but you cannot sell it. You have to use it or give it away. And of course, there's a lot of tracking and reporting requirements, and again, fines. So here are the products that you can use. There's compost and mulch. And the definition of mulch is actually so tight that it makes it kind of hard. So it's not for example, many cities use tree trimmings as mulch and for a lot of weed abatement and that kind of thing. Well, and that is not going to count. The mulch has to come from a permitted composting or facility, transfer station, or landfill. So it kind of narrows what is what type of mulch is okay, especially when cities are meeting a lot of their demand with stuff that they produce on site. However, if you have a new project, right, a WELO compliant project, you're probably buying mulch for that. And so it would be a matter of making sure that the mulch was recycled mulch, and from the appropriate type of facility. And then I mentioned there's a couple other products. So in addition to compost and mulch, the cities can use renewable gas from anaerobic digestion or biomass, electricity from biomass to help meet their target. And they can use any combination of these four. Especially for our cities in the Bay Area, we've been doing compost and mulch for so long. We don't really have a lot of anaerobic digestion in the area. So RNG, or renewable gas, and electricity is not really an option for us. And as far as biomass goes, there's been a lot of closures. That industry has kind of declined over the last 10 years. We've seen a lot of closures. And of what there is left, most of the feedstock is not an eligible feedstock. It's coming from forest or ag. And to be eligible for these procurement requirements, it needs to be diverted from landfill somewhere like urban wood waste. So that leaves us with compost and mulch, and mainly compost because for a couple of reasons, but mainly, mulch, there is less opportunity to use it. So back to this number and how it works. So just to give you an idea of how much material this is, for a city of 100,000 people, they're going to be required by the 0.08 tons per person times population to procure 8,000 tons of recovered organic waste products. CalRecycle does set a couple conversion factors because, as we know, a ton of organics into a composting facility doesn't equal a ton of compost. It's maybe about 6/10 of that from shrinkage and processing a ton. And so they give you these conversion factors of 1 ton of organics equals 0.58 tons of compost, or 1.45 cubic yards of compost. So I'm just going to stick with the cubic yards because it's a little easier for me to conceive. And I know we usually buy stuff in cubic yards. So for a city of 100,000 people, they would have to procure 11,600 cubic yards of compost every year if they were going to meet this target entirely in compost. And that much compost, when I look at it, thinking of a twice annual top dressing of a 1/2 inch on like a football field, that's about 127 fields. So I don't know a lot of cities of 100,000 people that have that many fields, but as we know too, with WELO and more drought tolerant landscapes going in, there's less need for a routine maintenance of organic matter input, right? Because some of these drought tolerant, especially California native plants, they don't need the ongoing kind of organic matter input. Anyway, so there's that. And with mulch, the conversion factor is just a 1-to-1. So it ends up being, because mulch is mostly really light, a lot of mulch to get to your 1 ton of organics. So like I said, I can make that slide available if you want to take longer with it. So a couple other things to think about. So a jurisdiction can procure it on its own. So like through its own landscape maintenance department and POs and that kind of thing, or through a direct service provider. So like a landscape contractor, right, who might be doing the landscape maintenance or construction for a city. And in addition to that, those two methods, or in addition to that, cities are also talking to their haulers, to their waste haulers, to see if they can get givebacks in to give to residents. As you know, like sometimes there'll be like those long lines of people and they get like a bag of compost, that kind of thing. So they're increasing those again too. Again, the city has to use it or give it away. And so that's one thing to think about. And the other thing is the compost has to be used and made in California, which means it doesn't have to be used in the city, the jurisdiction itself, and it doesn't have to come from the material the jurisdiction sent to the compost facility. So it opens it up a little bit. So I want to talk about direct service providers, because this would be where landscape contractors would fall. Here is the definition straight from the regulations. And as you can see, it's pretty comprehensive for anybody that's just driving or can't see the screen. It's any person, company, agency, district, or any other entity that provides a service to a jurisdiction pursuant to a contract or other written agreement. So it can really be anyone, right? It doesn't have to be a contractor that you're working with necessarily. And it also doesn't have to be someone that you already have a contract with. Like that agreement could be with could be with, for example, a school district, which is not a contractor, to say that they're already going to use compost, let's say on some new school construction. They could go ahead and have an agreement just to use that compost on their behalf. That could be all the agreements for. The important part is that they have that written agreement, because that's what the city is going to need for reporting, and that they, in addition, comply with all the other record keeping requirements. So this, again, I'm not going to go through this whole slide about what cities will need to do, but you can certainly take a look. I just bolded the part about record keeping because I feel like this is a part where things may change for landscape contractors a little bit. For the record keeping and reporting, cities need to submit the name and location and contact for each. So for each load of compost they get, they need to say where it came from, when they got it, how they used it, and how much there was. And in addition, they have to have the backup of all invoices and receipts. So it's a lot, and they will probably be passing this on to contractors. So, so you can certainly expect some increased documentation requirements, maybe amendments to existing contracts, or you might see new things in requests for bid that are coming out that are related to this. And I do think there will be a potential advantage for a firm that could demonstrate a couple things. Like one thing is that sure, we can track all this. Here it is. It's a very easy system, and we will provide these updates to you, this reporting to you quarterly, so that you can track your progress and whatever. But also thinking more broadly about how a landscape contractor could provide a service to a city. There's the initial, let's say the contract for taking care of the just of the parks maintenance or streets maintenance or something. That's one way, certainly. But you have other clients maybe in that city, and it might be possible for a landscape contractor to say, hey, well, we have all these other clients. Why we could be your direct service provider, and all the compost we use in the city would be, we're procuring, we just have an agreement with you to say we're procuring all of that on your behalf. And so then have a separate contract for that, so that in that sense, it wouldn't be that you would get paid by the city for anything probably other than the reporting. But, you know, I don't know how it would work. But anyway, just another thing to think about. If you have to build out record keeping and reporting infrastructure anyway, maybe find a way to leverage it like that. We can talk about that. And then for landscape designers and architects, again, it's just making sure that your specifications and your drawings are updated with 13 to make sure that the material compost and mulch is going to be 1383 compliant, that the contractor knows that they're going to have to keep records on this, and just making sure that the paper trail is there. And then of course, for everyone, right now, I would say the total, if the state has 40 million people in it, the organics target statewide is about 3.2 million tons of organics, or I always forget this number, and it's just so embarrassing, or over 4.5 million cubic yards of compost, right? Well, we don't make that much compost right now, so that is a problem. So and we also have existing markets that are using a lot of that compost wherever it's being produced. So we will see increased demand for compost and mulch. And at the same time, because there hopefully will be more organics going to composting, we're probably going to see potential declines in quality of material, meaning probably more instances of plastic and glass, and potentially a bigger price difference with a premium being put on the cleaner or cleanest compost compared to the stuff that's more contaminated. And let's see. And in addition to procurement and WELO, the other thing that I think that landscape contractors should be prepared for is more frequent and maybe more thorough load checks if you're taking your material to a green waste facility. And not only when you're self-hauling, but also at your shop, that there will be contamination monitoring happening, and that you will be required to have organics collection, which you may already at your business. And then lastly, I hate to end on this, it's such a bummer, I got to redo this presentation, but ever since this was just in the legislature, the only way this got passed was as an unfunded mandate. There was no way this was going to get passed, and the state was really eager to do something about climate change and reduce methane emissions. And so they made this an unfunded mandate. So they say the cities have the ability to increase rates. So as ratepayers, we will all be seeing increases in our garbage rates. And that's pretty much it as an overview. And then, so if you have any questions for me about this, I'm happy to answer them. And then I thought maybe we could just talk about, how you see your business potentially being affected by these regulations, and then what opportunities and challenges do you see being created by them? So with that, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, I'm back.
If anyone thinks of questions after we end with Kelly today, you're welcome to send me an email, because you all have my email contact, and I'm happy to forward that over to Kelly and she can get back to you.
No questions. Okay.
I don't have any questions, Kelly.
Okay, well, if no one has any questions, I think, I'm just curious how many, I might ask you guys a few questions. And how many of you do have contracts either with cities or, with cities or counties or something like that, public agencies? I don't know how many people are able to respond. Okay, so I'm guessing, I feel like some of you do, I feel like I know some of you. And so I'm hoping that, well, okay, thanks, Eric.
Eric does, yeah, Eric does.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so it's something to think about. If this is the first time you're hearing about it, it's also kind of a lot. And the first time, I've been following it this whole time, so it didn't, I've seen, as I've told people about this, people don't believe me initially that it's real, but it is real. And it's just kind of surprising because it's so, it's such an unusual regulation. But anyway,
Yeah, Kelly, thanks for covering this. For me, it's, I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but it's kind of a shocker to hear that this grew so quickly, and it's been in the works for such a long time, and I'm finally just hearing about it. But one of the first things that just crossed my mind was just how this is going to impact some of the organizations and some of our partners that actually do have businesses that sell compost, now that there's going to be so much of it available for free. So just one thing that I'm thinking.
Right. Well, I think that's a good question. And I know that there have been a lot of composters concerned about that. But the issue, the cities will still have to pay for it they will have to pay for it somehow, whether it's through their franchise agreement. So for example, that could be if you had an agreement with a facility or with a hauler that ran its own facility, those ones are a little bit more concerned, because those franchise negotiations start to get very complex, and they include so many different things that they may agree on a price per ton or price per cubic yard, or how many cubic yards they're going to give them every year. And then as the demand grows, they're basically seeing not so much it's free compost, but they've gotten locked into this price that's now very low compared to what they're seeing in the current market that's kind of artificially been inflated by this. Yeah, I think so. And they already kind of sell out. They'll just be selling out more faster. I don't know. I think their main concern right now too is just the not having enough material to meet this new demand plus existing demand. They've worked for so long to build markets. That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I thought I might see Tom on the call. Tom knows about this, Tom Del Conte. So he was involved in some of the comments on the regulations when they were developing them.
Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
Okay. For those we work in the residential sector, not in the public sector. I can't quite figure out how this would affect residential or residences at all. Is it not impact us, or am I not seeing it?
I think you could see, it wouldn't directly impact you other than if you are doing any green waste, making sure that, that's obviously going to have to be, if you're working in a place that isn't affected by a plant debris ban, it will be now effectively. So there's that. But as for the procurement, and the WELO, of course, will affect you as it always has. And then the procurement requirements, I feel like if you're do you use compost and mulch in your with your current clients?
Yes.
See, I think, and I've had some cities ask about this, can we reach out to landscape contractors and say, could we have an agreement with the contractor to say they are procuring compost at the behest of the city? And so that all the compost, I think, if you're not directly affected by the requirement, it becomes sort of an opportunity to potentially work with the city to help them meet their requirements. And then if you wanted to be compensated for that tracking of that, then there's, you would of course ask for that, right? It's not like a free, like just out of the goodness of your heart. Well, hold on, I have a dog making a nest over here. Hold on. Sorry. It's like, it was really distracting. So yeah, that is an opportunity potentially. Like I can't remember, what jurisdictions do you work in?
La Miranda area.
Yeah, so I would say, talking to Lafayette and Moraga, and I imagine there's probably some unincorporated county over there too, maybe. I'm not quite sure.
It's all county buildings.
Oh, it's all county. That's even better. So then if you were to reach out to, if we were to we talked to Contra Costa County quite a bit. And it was actually Alameda County. I brought that idea up. Why don't we have agreements with all the landscape contractors that work in our jurisdiction, that all the compost and mulch they use is at their is on behalf of that jurisdiction. And the other idea that has come up is potentially rebating some of the compost. So so the cities might say, okay, well, here's I know Sonoma County is looking at, for example, a 10% rebate. That's it. And then they would count all the compost. And so they'd be very happy with that, spending 10%. But then it would be also a discount to in their case, they're looking at big ag users. But if you had, there could be compost rebates available too, that would apply to not just ag or whatever, but could be to contractors on behalf of their clients. And then in this case, I know I said the compost wouldn't be free, but it could be to you for residential. You probably see an increase in free compost available to you and your clients because it just has to get moved. However, that compost would have been purchased by a city or county. So those are the ways I can see it affecting the residential sector, the residential landscape sector.
Thank you.
So not in bad ways, mostly in good ways. But anyway, but yeah, it's a good, yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how this all unfolds as time goes on.
Yeah, interesting is a word for it, that's for sure. I'm very nervous about it. I don't yeah, we'll see. Anyone else?
Kelly, thank you so much for the informative presentation. We really appreciate you reaching out and keeping our members informed.
Yeah, no problem. If you do like go to sleep and think, oh, I see a way that this might affect me now, or just down the road you hear about it, feel free to reach out to me whenever with questions.
Okay. Thank you,
But
everyone.
thanks for letting me come, and thanks for spending your time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Bye.
Bye.